I definitely don't always review every phone, and I definitely don't review it first. But when I review a phone, I review a phone, and that is today the case with the Pixel XL. And here's a little bit of a disclaimer, because especially at first, at the beginning of the video, I will nag a little bit more, which a lot of people won't maybe like so much, but I also will say one thing. I gotta admit, for a lot of good reasons, it is kind of the best possible Android phone on the market. But if it's the best possible purchase, is maybe something different and something that I'm not up to judge for, but it is what it... No, wait, that's exactly what I'm going to do, judge this phone. And I would say let's just start off with that, because the first thing, and as I said, is the design. The rest is really great, but I have just to nag about that, because this is an about $800 or $900+ phone. 5.5 inches, and this is a 5.5 incher for about 200. And as you can see, this one is even smaller. Just in general, more compact, pretty much the same width and thickness, and it doesn't feel any cheaper because it is metal as well, same as here, and it doesn't feel any less, and it's kind of even designed nicer because, as you can see, the bigger curves, because if they would have made those a little bit more extreme, the whole device would have felt a lot more narrow in the hand, because as you can see here, quite big bezels on the side. I just have to say that, and a lot of people that I showed this phone also said the top and bottom is just way too big, and I've just given this phone one person who has no idea about phones and asked him to judge the price, or assume the price. He said about 400, and that's where I'm gonna leave it, because yes, the aluminum is absolutely nicely built. It is slippery though, but that's a common thing of all the aluminum phones, but they definitely could have improved a lot of things, especially something like the fingerprint reader is not super fast, because as you can see here, you also always have to wait for the kind of vibration to go off. If it's on, as you can see here, a lot of phones already allow just for a quick tap. This one you will hold a little bit longer. Especially Huawei phones are here definitely the benchmark here. This is not the fastest fingerprint reader. It is absolutely okay. It is reliable, but it is just okay, which is maybe not quite okay for the price. Of course, here we have the sensors, microphone, and so on. Also the camera and the flash, all good here. The glass is what it is. On the top we have an antenna band, headphone jack, a SIM card. I almost said SD card tray, no, just SIM card. And on the bottom we have the one speaker on this side. This one is just to make it symmetrical, and USB Type-C. On the right side we have the volume rocker, absolutely nice position, but not so much for the power button. And I won't really judge this a lot, because this is a very subjective thing. I've complained about this already since the Nexus 5, and a lot of people don't have a problem with that. They actually prefer it slightly higher. But if you just compare it with another phone here, once again, you will see how big of a placement difference this is. And this is just something that bugs me personally. Otherwise, there is a notification LED somewhere in there, but I don't think it's activated by default, because you have kind of the Google inbuilt thing and so on. And yes, that is pretty much it. And this is just what I said. I am not super pleased with the overall design. It's just not compact, and it just doesn't feel what it is in terms of price. But it is, after all, still good. There's absolutely no problem here. The display though, absolutely fantastic, because it is very bright. I only needed 25% of fixed brightness for my normal use. Of course, since it's AMOLED, the viewing angles are stable. Maximum brightness was also absolute top outside. And the white point is great, actually this time, not so much like it was on the Nexus 6P, so all good here. The black is of course amazing since it's AMOLED. There is an sRGB mode in the developer options, and if you want more realistic colors, you can get that. Personally, I liked those a lot in normal use, but I have to say, especially in videos, it was definitely oversaturated, and my own skin color looked quite wrong. But I definitely like the overall balance after all, because it's not extremely oversaturated. So still absolutely okay from my side. And like I said, it is a fantastic display. Now, the sound. It's definitely not a bad speaker. That's something I want to make sure of. But what it is placed wrong, because as you have seen, if I hold it like this for games, I did block it pretty much all the time. So you will have to rearrange a little bit. But other than that, maximum volume was absolutely good enough. I've definitely heard louder ones and better ones, especially a little bit more rich and full ones. But it is a speaker that I really can't complain about. It does the job. It does it loud enough. It does it in terms of sound quality absolutely fine enough. So it's a good speaker. There are better ones, but there are definitely a lot worse ones, and it is good enough for me not to complain, and that is the main point at the end. The headphone jack, though, I have to say, is total average. It's not super loud, and in terms of sound quality, it's nothing special at all. It will get the job done, I guess, for definitely every earphone. For headphones, it could get a little bit tight, but yeah, sad to see, but still, okay. Now, performance. Let me kill off all the apps, and yes, now we have a kill all button, which is nice. Let's check the launch times, and I gotta say, these are amazing. Launch times are absolutely fast. The device is very responsive and great, and my gestures usually work quite good, as you can see here, but for some reason they don't always work. As you can see now, it's super reliable, super snappy, super zippy, great, but for some reason on some locations it doesn't work. But the screen really fast and responsive, and the performance overall is absolutely superb. Super smooth at all times. What I've noticed though, if I use what I usually like to do, the old engine browser, and yes, a lot of people always complain why I mentioned that, but that's just the one that I use. There I see, and that's pretty much the only app where I occasionally see some stutters. The rest, as you can see here, no matter how fast I flick through, no matter what I try to make it trip, no, it won't. It is super smooth thanks to AMOLED. It looks 60 frames per second smooth. It is super responsive. As you can see here, super nice and very consistent at all times. This is now the new best experience, especially also the multitasking with 4 gigs, super reliable. There are a few phones that get very close to that. As a whole, maybe not quite that, but I would say just maybe 5%. So it's not far off. It's not leaps and bounds better than anything else on the market. But especially things like, as you can see here, Google Plus work out absolutely fantastic. And at the moment, it is the overall best performing device that I have used so far. I like it absolutely a lot. And the same actually also goes as well for games, because those are playable at all times with a very, very high frame rate. Yes, a few times you have some minor occasional slowdowns, but I guess this could be also as well kind of a little bit of sloppy development, but super smooth. Very consistent. You can play all the games, and it doesn't really heat up a lot at idle base because the Snapdragon 820 these times, or the Snapdragon 821, is very efficient. I like it a lot. Gaming is great, and especially if you use a Bluetooth controller, also with the bigger screen, the gaming experience is great on games. For like example, Modern Combat works out great. What I've noticed, games like Gear Club, which are very new, don't really work so well. Those were very stuttery, but I guess this has to be the game, but because I haven't seen it working properly on anything else either. Okay, and this is getting a little bit stuttery because I had something, a little bit of a trembling in my eye. Now, let's get to the battery. As you can see here, 2 hours and 5 minutes for a full charge. Not amazing, and I used the quick charger that it came with, but for the size of the battery, that's absolutely fine in my opinion. Maybe at the beginning it could charge a little bit quicker, but what is amazing here, okay, I just used 25%, but like I said, the display already is super bright here, 10% for 1 hour of YouTube, and thanks to AMOLED, this makes it one of the best in terms of battery drain for video, which is absolutely great. In terms of battery use, in normal life, I had to say, it is a little bit wonky, because on my first day when I used it at a workplace where I know the connection is horrible, I maybe got usually 50-60% of the battery capacity what I usually get with other phones. So for example, my S7 made it 2.5, maybe 3 hours, where I got about 5 with this one. So it definitely showed me how good the standby drain can be and how good the drain can be under extreme situations. And therefore I had super high expectations. I gotta say though, once I used it back at my normal workplace, it didn't quite impress me as I expected it to be, because there I got maybe I would say 6 hours in mixed use, definitely 5 or so in mobile data only on Wi-Fi. You could maybe even get 7 over a day, but it is really good. It is also a little bit wonky though, because I had also 80% of the time before I got it back working again, just maybe 4 hours. So I'm not quite sure what was there the issue, because the standby drain wasn't as amazing thanks to those anymore, and everything else wasn't as amazing. I'm not quite sure what is that, but the potential is there. Maybe it was a rogue app or so, maybe the restart fixed it, but it definitely can provide a great experience, and yeah, nothing else to say. It is a great battery life after all. Now, in terms of software, not quite sure where to actually begin, because this is not really stock Android anymore. As you can see here, I will change the launcher on any device, so I don't actually really know quite exactly where to change it. But okay, you know the Pixel launcher by now, I don't show it, but I use Nova launcher anyways, because of some smaller things, and that's one thing that I would complain about. I want more customization from stock Android or from Pixel Android, because I want to swipe down and just be able to receive my notifications, swipe up maybe to launch some apps, or as you can see here, if I make this, there are so many options with other browsers or launchers that I don't have here. What I like is if we swipe once, we get the quick settings in a very small pattern, but what I don't get is if you swipe once, you can't actually access it whole. But if I drag it load, why does it actually show me a second line? Because I can't with one, I have to do it twice. I think that's a little bit of an odd decision in terms of animations. But yeah, it's great that we have them here. Of course, here you can also rearrange them if you enable the system tuner. And I definitely like the newer design with the gray on white and the blue in the settings. Just more subtle colors. I just prefer that. In terms of display or general settings, we have like adaptive display or whatever they call it these days. Not really much else, and there is not a lot of customization, and that is kind of my only gripe, because the rest absolutely solid. The system is brilliant, notification work out super great. I don't really have anything to show, and there are tons of videos out there on the internet that show this. I just want to get to one thing down. Software is super sleek, it is more functional than ever before, it works great, the customization is there on the bare minimum level. I would definitely wish for more. Of course, updates will be the first. We have Google Assistant, which is something that I don't find to be that amazing thing that everyone makes it to be, because I've used it for a week, but I didn't really do anything more than I usually do with the Google search anyways either, so that's something that you have to say. But the software as it is great, and don't forget one thing, this is a Pixel, so kind of the successor of the Nexus, and custom ROMs will be there, and then you will have the best possible software experience anyway. So okay, that's it. Now let's check the pictures here, and I gotta say I'm super impressed with the camera, especially for selfies. As you can see, so much details here. Colors look absolutely right, super sharp at all times, the exposure levels, and the main highlight here is how quick it shoots pictures. Yes, maybe you have heard about the lens flare issue, and it is noticeable on the front cam, also the one on the back, which I will show a little bit later. But I have to say I'm impressed by the camera. It shoots so quickly, effortlessly, and I did manage to get really one bad shot. No matter what you do, in no matter what situations, even indoors with not the best lighting, super sharp, super great, and I'm absolutely amazed by the camera. If you go into low light, this is with a flash, looks absolutely nice and sharp, really brilliant, and taken very fast. And here without, and still, it doesn't get grainy, it doesn't really lose sharpness, and it still maintains a very natural picture. Here once again, I am just blown away how fast it is in lower light or artificial light situations. Super nice and sharp with amazing working autofocus, and it just exposes everything just right. Nothing ever seems wrong or overexposed, underexposed, and even outdoors. We can see here how much details, and this shot is done instantly. And what it also does is really nice. We get HDR auto, and it sometimes renders the picture in the background, so you don't notice it at all, and you can shoot pictures and pictures after one and another, and it just maintains to be great. Okay, here as you can see, one example of the lens flare. Here once again, and here again, and once again. But I also have to say, the sun was standing very low, and therefore I had this issue. With the sun being a little bit higher, the issue wouldn't be there, and I wouldn't really bother too much, because you can easily avoid it. You see it on the viewfinder, and that's why I don't see this as the issue, and with software it could get fixed in some ways after all. But once again, I have to say, I am impressed of how many details it picks up, even in not the very best light situation, because here it was actually quite in the shadow, and still maintains to be super sharp. And I would say this is the best camera experience, and even the best camera quality that I've seen so far, because I've never shot pictures faster, more reliable, and with a better quality. And the same also here goes for the video I will show this. Of course, you will see the lens flare once again. What is to be seen though is that I really like how fast the focus is, which you will see in just a second. And also, as you can see here, the transition in the exposure is great, but the autofocus is very abrupt. Super reliable and super precise, but it is very abrupt. I would like to have maybe seen something a little bit more subtle. And the next thing that is kind of a highlight is their image stabilization, even though it's just on a software base. As you can see here, everything looks like almost shot with a drone or like on a gimbal. Super smooth. You can shake as much, and I've did a lot of other takes to try that, and it works out so great. Here you will see the very abrupt but super sharp focus. This is 4K, by the way. Of course, you will only see it in 1080p, but the autofocus usually works out super reliable, just right. And I'm impressed by this camera. I'm actually kind of blown away. And yes, I already like the one on the 6P, but this is a lot of step. And in general, video, photo, autofocus, speed, quality, overall experience, this kicks everything else's ass. And I have nothing else to say here in that regard. And that's why I'm going to switch back again. And I will already now go to my pros and cons, not to make this any longer because I've already taken enough time. But this device is definitely worth talking a little bit longer about. Okay, as you can see, not a lot of pros, but quite some negative points. Don't worry, the important ones are in brackets because they are not something crucial, but it is what it is, and I have to just one thing say, it nails the important stuff. Okay, as you can see, good build quality. It's great, maybe not quite $900 weight, but fantastic display, no complaints here at all. Superb in every way, super satisfying. Good speaker, good enough. I should have maybe written good enough because good enough means more than good for me because I had no real complaints about it and it satisfied me at all times. Superb performance in every little way. The pretty much best overall experience. This is what iOS once was in terms of Android relations because now pretty much completely lag-free, super consistent, fast, responsive. Great. Great battery life. Maybe not always, a little bit wonky. Great software. I can't really deny anything that, even though I'm not the biggest fan of stock Android anymore these days, even though it's Pixel OS, the best in class camera. That's maybe just my opinion, but definitely in terms of experience. Now, let's get to the negative points, and I will point out that you don't really have to bother about too many. It doesn't feel like a $900 plus phone. This is kind of not even my gripe because the next one is it's not compact at all. If this would have been as big as a 5.5 inch could be, I would have definitely been a little bit positive, especially with the next thing or the over next thing, the power button placement. Subjective thing, and that's why it's in brackets. I wish for it to be a lot lower, but there will be a software update where we have raised to wake the screen, and this will kind of already get this out of the way. I also think the fingerprint reader is a little bit too high because I have to, as you can see, if I hold it normally, completely stretch and not even reach the whole middle of the center of that. So just the thing. Slippery, as all aluminum foams, not a real big problem. Just good fingerprint reader, I just have to say that. Smart Task Launcher doesn't always work. That's of course also once again, that's why it's in brackets, a subjective thing, only a minor thing. It worked like 90%, so not a big problem. It got better. Speaker placement, it will get blocked, but the speaker is okay. More customization, please, Google. Give me a few more options. I just want a more capable launcher, even though I don't really care about it since I wouldn't use any. And that's why I just have to emphasize that any stock launcher, because Nova launcher or anything else is just way more personalizable. That's not a real word. Customizable and definitely more capable. And then expensive, and I had to write that in big letters because I think it is, after all, expensive. Okay, if you want the pretty much almost no compromise phone and you are willing to pay for it, it's still kind of worth it, but I still think it is a little bit too expensive. They could have made it cheaper, and especially in Germany it's quite expensive. It seems like they actually maybe subtle or a little bit quietly dropped the price a little bit because I think it was even higher at first. Personally, I would go, I think, for the Pixel and not the Pixel XL because I prefer the 5-inch phone. This one is just a little bit unwieldy for me. It would be usable, absolutely. And I gotta say, the first thing that I mentioned at the beginning, it is kind of, as I said, the best possible Android experience in general, the best possible phone itself in general. But if it's the best purchase, here is what I would say, nay, maybe not. Because you get a 90, 95, maybe 85% experience of that for like half the price if you buy, for example, a ZTX 7, a OnePlus 3T, or even a Motorola Z Play is a really great phone in a lot of aspects, and in some even better, like for example the sound and the fingerprint reader, things like maybe the battery life and so on. As a whole, as I said, mostly flawless, especially if some of the personal subjective things don't bother you. It is great, but it is still expensive. If the price, especially after a few months, drops, no denying, it is a killer phone, absolutely. But if you're not willing to spend no matter what price to get the best one, and are okay with a few trade-offs in some aspects, but maybe therefore even get some benefits in other ones for a lot less money, it is still worth considering at least that. So everyone praises it to be by far the very best phone, but just because of the design and price is why I'm not saying this. If they would have made it more compact, and if they would have made it a little bit more reasonable in terms of price, I would have said yes, absolutely. But as it is, maybe. But still, killer phone. And that's where I'm going to leave it. If you liked it, sub. If you have any complaints or if you have anything good to say, leave that in the comments. Fine with me. And the most important thing is, I hope you enjoyed the review and I hope you enjoy the day. Until next time, bye.